starting, please?
She's on her way. No, we need you here, kid.
Okay.
Yeah, need a gavel.
See,
She'll get here when she gets here. She's gonna be one.
I guess the first
You know,
issue is.
are we
roll
waiting
call.
on Realtor again? She was parked there then.
Shall we call the roll?
Yeah.
All right, roll call. Member McGordy,
Present.
Member Weir,
Here.
Cito Angelo's here. Member Miller. Here. Member Riley. Here. Chair Bowman.
Here.
Member Myrtle.
Here.
Chair Baraj.
Here.
Vice Chair Ms. Donna.
Yes.
Member Liberty.
Here.
Member Diamond.
Here.
All right, we are here to discuss, oh, sorry. Oh, thank you very much. Anybody in the audience like to comment on items of interest? Yes, ma'am.
My name is Josephine Silva. I've been interested in mental health issues for some time. I went to the property.
Oh, this is for items not on the agenda, ma'am.
Oh,
Yes, sorry.
okay. I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
All right. Will I have a chance to speak for items on the agenda?
absolutely.
Thank you.
All right, anybody else like to make any observations? So discussion possible action regarding proposed recommendation to the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors for the purchase of property at 8207 East Road, Redwood Valley, for the cost of $369,000, of which I understand a third of which will be paid by the Sheriff's Department for a substation in Redwood Valley. And I'd like to open this to discussion.
So it's public discussion now for us.
Oh, now we get public discussion. Oh, no, afterward, right, yeah, I'm sorry.
Watch you like a hawk.
Well, I keep, all these.
There's just so many choices.
We'll start with the committee.
Anybody on the committee? Yes, sir.
So, Chair, thank you, and thanks committee for being here on a non-scheduled meeting. This property has come up, and we're somewhat under the gun of other purchasers looking at it. This is something that is near and dear to my heart because training first responders and mental health professionals and parents and nurses and teachers and so forth regarding the care and treatment of victims of mental health is very important to me. As many of us know who have had a chance to look at the property, it appears to be a well-built building. The utilities are in, of course we're not going through the permit process or anything like that. This would be, it's not a turnkey building, but my hope would be that we could have it taken care of by the first year and have training starting in 2020. It's a large building, 2,350 square feet. The ADA bathrooms are very important. It is not sprinkled. I don't know what the laws are regarding the occupancy. Ross and I were talking about that there. It's not a change of use. It's in a commercial, it's zone commercial, it's not zone residential. The property appears to be good for not only what we're looking at for, in my opinion, for the training facility, but you said a third, and actually 30% of the purchase price, if approved by this board, would be paid for by the sheriff's office. It's $110,000 and change. That would allow us to get most of our Ukiah deputies off of Low Gap Road and into the Redwood Valley area, which is important to me because when school's in session, Low Gap Road is a very congested area, and it's certainly a concern of mine when we have deputies that are in a hurry and the roads are full of pedestrians and vehicle traffic on school days. It's a concern. So this is almost a two-solution answer for a big problem we have for me, and I certainly would encourage anybody to discuss why this wouldn't work. But one of the things that I'm going to ask as we go down this road is at least 2 other members to work with me for ad hoc on making sure that the building would be audio-visually correct, connected. It certainly has all utilities and internet, but making sure it's going to be the training facility that we envision it to be. So thank you. Thanks to the members for being here on short notice, and thanks for going out and looking at the property.
Well, first of all, I'd like to say that Kit informed me that for an older building, you don't need to have it sprinkled.
I said I wasn't sure.
Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. And I personally was very impressed with the building and with its suitability for the use that Sheriff Ullman proposes. And I was glad to be able to take a look at it before the meeting. Please, Jeff.
Yeah, I saw the building. I thought it was suitable. One of the questions I asked and asked the sheriff to respond to here about what he envisions the use of training to be. Training, I think, is really critical for mental health generally and for the kind of response that the sheriff and other healthcare professionals and other people who deal with mental health. And question I had is what will go on in any kind of training facility, and I was trying to envision what would happen in there. And I think just one other thing maybe the sheriff can answer, as he did when we were at the site, what would happen in a training facility. But it seems that as we're looking at all the different mental health needs, all of them are going to take some time to get going. And to me, it makes it even more important that we get training going right away, because I think that could facilitate everything else that we do. So, Sheriff, could you maybe respond to what would happen in a training facility? So
Sure. Okay, sure.
Please.
So when Measure AG first went on the ballot, and then Measure B, one of the supervisors said, why are you including this training facility in language? You know, we have many meeting rooms in this county, why can't you just use a meeting room? And training for this type of situation, for mental health, contact and so forth, is much more than classroom setting academic training. It's hands-on, it could be pads out there, it could be, as in law enforcement we have equipment known as shoot, don't shoot. It's digital training that puts law enforcement and first responders in a situation where a person could be holding a gun, but in the next scenario, the exact same person could be holding a phone, and then after that, he could be holding a book. And so it certainly works with the first responders for analyzing every situation on its own face. But also, more important than that, it could be used for trainings in academic settings, such as NAMI meetings or behavioral health meetings. Certainly it would be a meeting room that would have the audiovisual capabilities. Basically, it would be top-notch. It would probably be the best audiovisually meeting room that government would own in this area. So it would suffice it to say it would answer most, if not all, of our training needs. And the parking lot is capable of handling that. I know there was one question, I think Jenny Miller asked what the occupancy of that, and that would only be answered by a fire marshal, but obviously the occupancy in a classroom setting would be different than if everybody was standing. So that's a fair question, and I don't know the answer to that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, just related to that is how much time do you see training for Measure B type issues going on? Is it once a month, once a week? Do you have any sense of how often that space would be used for this kind of training?
I do. So let's talk about how often that training happens now. And we've had 2 of the CIP trainings this year, which have been a big deal. The first one was free. The second we had to pay for the same room in Redwood Valley. And so we're averaging 2 a year for this year. This training facility, I envision it being used weekly. I don't know about daily, but certainly weekly for once we get it up and running to have regular training. This is a regional training center. It's not just Mendocino County. And while there's not a business plan to make money offering these courses to out-of-county and law enforcement agencies and fire and ambulance responders, there's certainly a goal of mine not to lose money on the training. You know, during the CIT training, it was a very expensive training. It was very expensive. We paid $45,000 for both trainings, I think, probably for those. And those, a cadre of instructors, 100% of that went to the instructors. And so the cost of training would certainly be based on who we're hiring to be the instructors, you know, but the goal would be to use local experts and so forth. But at least weekly, and then some weeks there would be a daily thing. And maybe there's evening meetings for NAMI and so forth, or other mental health and health professionals to meet in. I don't think I'm gonna call it a community meeting room, you know, for 4-H and so forth to meet. But it would be a meeting that Measure B would have oversight of. And as such, the Sheriff's Office, we do have our own training bureau. And while it's certainly, anybody else could say they want to do it, we have computer scheduling for our other training rooms. And if it was this board's desire, we would, through our training division, keep track of the reservations of who has it when and so forth, to make sure the keys are there, make sure that it's clean when it's not used, when it's emptied and so forth.
What is CIT?
Critical incident training, that's what we did for the first responders under Stepping Up Initiative.
Thank you. Any other comments? Oh, Shannon.
I have a couple questions. This is the first time that this group has actually spoken about this training facility. It's really not addressed even in the Kemper study, other than as a line item in the budget. So I don't have a clear sense of what a training program looks like. And although the sheriff has expressed a need for this type of facility, I think there's opportunities to explore partnerships with our existing educational and medical facilities that might be a lot more cost-effective than purchasing a building that we don't know everything about. We don't know what the cost of rehabilitation is. And I do have concerns about prioritizing this purchase over some of the behavioral health facilities that we talked about for the actual patients. I also have a question. You indicated, Sheriff, that the property is zoned commercial, but the information that I have from the assessor's office says that it's zoned rural residential. So that's, I guess, a statement and a question.
And I know the realtor's here.
I could answer that question.
And also, I didn't see it on the MLS listing. But I guess I don't know how much demand there actually is for it.
There's, I should answer that question too.
Yeah. Please, would you answer the questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Is that me up here? Thank you. I'm Lynn Mackner. I'm with Remax in Ukiah. And I too noted that it was commented by Tom that he thought maybe the zoning was C1,
Okay.
but instead it is rural residential,
Okay,
5 acre
I'm the same.
minimum. And yet in that zoning category, there is availability to use just as you are proposing, due to the fact that a use permit would not even be required. Civic uses are part of the RR5 category. So he fits in, doesn't have to go through a specialized meeting in order to even get a use permit. It's a given within that zone, so we're good there. Let's see, another question came up as to fire sprinklers. And typically and as to my understanding, and of course that could be verified, but until we're spending a lot of money on the building, we could in fact trigger, by the amount we spend, some contribution towards both accessibility, ADA accessibility, and sometimes even fire sprinklers in the city. A change of use can sometimes trigger these things, so we'll have to verify that. But unless you're doing a lot of costly renovation, that may not even get in the way. As to its existing use for training, you know better what you wanted to do, but relative to the communication and the way it's being used now, they have strong internet, allowing them to run internet-based TVs on either side of the room, and that's been the way in which they've been able to get a lot of the education they teach there done, as well as mics and sound setup that's again already there for you. Are there any other questions that I could answer?
Listing?
Excuse me?
Is it in a listing?
Oh, pardon me. So they had a thing with You know, a lot of the listings that we put out in our MLS system automatically generate and populate to other sites. And there was a reason in which, I think that as well, they sometimes give proposed sales value. They don't like that, so they had a restriction on this, that it would be in MLS for real estate agents to see. And unless we were, it's difficult to find then, other than LoopNet, which is commercial real estate based opportunity to see publicly the listings being offered. So if you were to look in LoopNet, you would have found it there.
May I follow up on that?
Thank you. I'm sorry.
And then, excuse me, go ahead. There was a question also I just thought of that was asked as to its popularity. And I sadly had a technological problem today and discovered it just before we were to be there. And I felt bad on the way over. I was thinking, Kads, I almost stood in the way of your opportunity because there are at least 3 other offers pending your meeting before they're responded to, which I was able to accomplish for the county, as I knew that there was serious interest. They were interested as well in seeing whether or not you would, you were going to move forward. And so we fortunately in a place where there is still time to get that accomplished.
Thank you.
May I follow
Yes.
up on that? So the zoning codes in the county seem to be in conflict with what you're describing. Civic uses, including educational facilities, require a major use permit. It's a political process.
In R5,
Yes.
I apologize if that's the case. I have that ordinance with me, and I thought that was a non-permitted use, so
Specifically
we'll definitely get to
says
the bottom of that.
permitted
right
in the
now.
RR district
Oh,
upon
yes.
issuance of a major use permit.
Carmel seems to have some
What I
information.
wanted to say is that I've asked Nash Gonzalez, who is our recovery director, but also our resident expert on land use, to work with us on this. So apparently there are a lot of questions by this committee, and I appreciate Lynn's response. And as I'm sure everybody in here, Lynn knows the property better than the rest of us. However, when we talk about whether it's county ordinances, anything with land use, I always go to Nash for his expert opinion. So as we move forward, if we move forward, we could utilize Nash. And I don't know, Nash, if there's anything you want to add today, just based on the questions that have come up. And I don't know, Lynn, if you answered the question about maximum occupancy on the building.
And going back to the zoning code, and I don't know where Shannon might be looking in the county, I see section 20.048.010 permitted uses. The following use types are permitted in the RR district. Section B, civic use types. See chapter 20.020 as well, and it lists several civic uses, including fire protection and police protection.
Do you have anything, Nash?
So,
I know you just got called into this.
I'm not,
Can you go to the podium, please?
Yes.
first of all, I'd like to take a look at the property in more detail, take a look at the zoning to verify. But if we're going off the rural residential, if it's an educational facility, it does require a major use permit. That makes it subject to CEQA. So as far as fire and police protection services, if this was just a standalone substation or a standalone firehouse, it would be a permitted use. But when you start bringing different use types, that triggers the change of use and the change of occupancy.
And can often trigger sprinklers and other
Yes.
improvements.
Are you the listing agent?
I am,
Okay.
yes.
Jan?
I don't have any questions, but I have some comments. First of all, as Shannon said, there was no previous discussion of this, although I know it's really important to the sheriff and I can understand that. However, I think that it's something that we need to include in our ongoing discussion, since we didn't think it was important to have a meeting 2 weeks ago, and yet this is a crisis and all of a sudden we need to show up. So if it's considered an ad hoc committee for this purchase, which is now crisis planning, why have we not had an ad hoc committee before to discuss this whole project? I've heard of 2 previous considerations of a place for this that were kind of like rumors that some people knew about, some people didn't. And so I'm really hesitant to make this an emergency decision because I think that's when we get in trouble, especially considering that we didn't understand the use permit and all of that thing, but here we are. Finally, I'm wondering about community input because there was such a rouse about, considering Howard Hospital in Willits. My understanding is there are already traffic issues with that site that I've learned from people who live in that community. And if that was the reason that we don't want to have it on Logat, then why is it being considered in another place where there are traffic issues? So those are my comments. Thank you.
In excess of 70% that's being asked right now, how much of a commitment are we going to have to fund out of Measure B to modernize this business and to operate this training facility budget-wise?
The only thing I wanted to say, because everybody's talking about occupancy, right now they have 120 seats in that. There might be 118. I had to run out before I could get the full count, but it's right around 120 seats.
So to Mark's question, it's a fair question. I think that, let me tell you the history of Measure AG. Measure AG said 10% of mental health funds, the funds derived from the TAC to be used for a training facility. Now Measure B, when it was written, that was taken out. It didn't say 10%, it just said for a training facility. So certainly it wouldn't be the 10% of $3 million or something. As many of us know from listening to the costs of whether it's the Orchard Street project or rehabilitating Old Howard Hospital in the millions of dollars before a shovel hits the dirt. And this facility, so it would cost the Measure B committee around $200 and some thousand dollars, and the sheriff's 200 and I don't know the answer other than to say it would be a lot less than starting a building anew with a permit process, putting in the infrastructure, and so forth. So let me just throw out a number. Let's say it was $100,000. $100,000 would be for it's going to have to replace the carpet because the theater seating is going to come out. The electronic audiovisual equipment, I believe it's ADA compliant. I believe everything appears to be ADA compliant, including the parking lot and so forth. So while I don't know the specificity of the answer, I can certainly say it would be a lot cheaper. It's a lot cheaper than if we were starting on a bare piece of ground to start again. And as far as other opportunities go, I know that I've spoken with the college on many occasions, and while the college has said they're certainly interested in having conversations about this, the only meetings we've ever had are when I ask them if they can meet. Their interest is only if we go to them and talk to them. There doesn't seem to be an interest on going the other way, and I would welcome them being here at the meeting. And as far as a short plan meeting, I think I was one of 2 people who voted not to cancel the June meeting, and I think Jed and I voted no, and other people voted yes, because I believe it is important to have these meetings and talk about it. And while this topic hasn't come up on other agendas in the past, it's because there has been a very strong desire of getting mental health facility in this county and improved services. But the training is not something we have to wait for 5 years to get. And when I say 5 years, I think all of us wouldn't be surprised if we had a blank piece of ground and started a new building now and going through the public project. 5 years wouldn't be a surprise to anybody if an expert came in and said it's going to be 5 years before you can use the building. And with this building, we could have training starting in January of 2020 of getting the training going. And people-to-people training is going to help us with our mental health problem even more so than a brick and mortar psychiatric health facility even though I'm a very strong proponent of a psychiatric health facility. This is the training that we need to get a facility, and we need to be known for delivering a final product of training to first responders and other mental health professionals. So these are good questions. I'm glad we're talking about them. Thank you.
Ms. Riley?
I agree wholeheartedly in the need for training, the prioritization of training, but I don't see anything in our current infrastructure or resources that prevents us from having that training now. Before we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars of taxpayer money, I'd rather see us make a more concerted effort to speak to our medical facilities, our educational facilities. I think $300,000 or whatever it ends up being is a really expensive room rental when we're talking about something that's going to be used once or twice a month for mental health specifically. I think we have lots of underutilized facilities in the county. I think it's an isolated location to be talking about for regional training. If you're talking about attracting people from out of the area to really maximize the use of this facility, there's no lodging facilities, there's very few restaurants, there's maybe a gas station in Redwood Valley. This is not an ideal location for a centrally located regional training facility.
Vote.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ross, okay.
So I want to start with, I might, a full disclosure, I've talked to Tom about building a substation out at my place, at the old Bayside site, sorry. I don't think that constitutes a conflict, but Kit can probably answer that. I'll say it again.
I heard it.
Okay, so I don't think it constitutes a it conflicts me out, but I just wanted to be full disclosure.
No, I don't see that would.
Okay, so, and of course, I support my friend and our beloved Sheriff, Tom Allman. Always have, always will. That being said, that doesn't mean I support every initiative that he brings forth or any project he wants to bring forth, but I would say, especially after looking at the building, it's going to be, yeah, that's a really good price. I mean, you think about, it's, what is it, 2,300 square feet?
Plus a second.
Plus the two-bedroom home, small two-bedroom home. You know, that's a screaming deal. If the county doesn't buy it, I probably will. But I would put, and so I'm actually, and I did talk to Tom about it, and I looked at I read the measure again, and it does talk about a training facility, but I tend to agree with Shannon's, like, we have a lot of facilities that we should be able to use, but maybe not. I don't pretend to know what those needs would be. I could support this, but I would have to have a couple of strong asterisks. Asterisks? How do you say that? Something like that. So the big one is get some kind of idea of what we're going to end up spending total on this. But then the other one is the percent. I think we as advocates for the value for the taxpayers. I think we need Measure B. We made recommendations on Measure B money, which is money towards mental health and the training relating to that. I think that the portion that Measure B should recommend to the board, obviously we don't write a personal check for this, but the portion we recommend to the board should relate directly to the beneficial use. So we should not have a building, as Shannon's pointing out, we should not build a building or own a building that only goes towards this, right? It should be leveraged and used for other agencies, other purposes. I would say, though, that Measure B money should be restricted to that which is beneficial use for the mental health training in Mendocino County. So as long, I'm supportive as long as it relates proportional to its beneficial use to Measure B, could be 10%, right? I mean, if we're gonna use it twice a week, and it could be some it's gonna be some percentage less than 100. But it could, who knows what that number is gonna be, so.
And if I could respond to that, I believe that it would be fair that once this training facility is up and running, it would be part of our monthly report of how the building's being used, of how many people are being trained with it and so forth. Because this committee, whether we like it or not, is going to last as long as the voters allow this tax to remain in place. And the training should never end, People bathe daily and people should be trained weekly, or if not daily. So I'm a very strong proponent of training, and I appreciate that, because I think that while this is not in the downtown section of Ukiah, I can't agree that it's in a remote area. I think Redwood Valley has access to both Highway 20 and 101 fairly close with good parking, and so while there isn't a hotel right now, within the next 3 months, there's going to be, the next 6 months, there's going to be a very, very large hotel within a 1.5 mile, air mile of where this is going to be at the Coyote Valley Casino. So I don't think anything is 100%, of yes, this is a perfect thing. If it was a perfect situation, we wouldn't be talking about mental health right now. We'd be at our jobs, doing our jobs. Mental health is impacting us in every way. And it impacts me as much as it impacts Dr. Miller over there. This is a day-to-day situation, and we're working hard to improve not just the delivery of mental health services to the victims, but to improve the training to the responders for their safety and for the quality of life of our mental health patients. Thank you.
Who's next?
So I wanted to say I was actually impressed with the building. I didn't know what to expect when I went out. We do a lot of training in behavioral health and bring in specialists all the time, and we're always struggling for space. And we have a lot of buildings, but I can tell you every time we talk about doing a big training, there's never a building to hold the capacity, which is why when we did the CIT trainings, we had to really search and find an option. A lot of times that option is Consolidated Tribal, wonderful facility. We do have to pay when we use their building every time we go out there, once again in Redwood Valley. So we're still in the same area. It would be wonderful, at least from the behavioral health side, to have a building we could use regularly and not have to worry about capacity and bringing our trainers in. We do bring a lot of trainers in, both just for mental health, cultural competency training for our providers, and a lot of other things. So it definitely looked large enough for what we would need on the behavioral health side to bring in the special trainers that we bring in. We can definitely hold CIT trainings there in the future, which would be wonderful too.
Jan?
Well, that answers one of my questions, because my question was, what training, as has been said before, are we talking about? And if it's only for law enforcement and first responders, we've had 2 of those in 6 months, and they were $45,000 each. So I don't see how we can afford that twice a month or twice a week to have that kind of a training. Again, I think that consultation is really an important thing in governing and making decisions. And there's been no consultation on this concept here. If we had an ad hoc committee to discuss this in the past, that would make this a little less painful. Also, yes, we have to pay to rent when we did the CIT training, but once we own a building, we have to pay for utilities all the time. It's not just a one-time thing. So just because something is purchased doesn't mean that's the end of expenses. And where is the budget for that? That hasn't been really clear, plus the traffic issue.
So, thank you. I just wanted to respond. I mean, my role here is just to make sure we're following what the law says. And of course, when you read the law, when you read the law, the very first part of this law in terms of Measure B was this idea of a training facility. Sorry, I've got it on my phone. That's why I wasn't listening to the last. It does say a regional behavioral health training facility to be used by behavioral health professionals public safety and other first responders. And that is, section A of the law in terms of what the purpose of the Measure B funds were for.
Carmel?
Thank you. Government gets criticized for how slow we move. And there are times that we do move slow. And there are times I think we move at lightning speed for government. And when we talk about not having discussions about this particular property or the training center, it is, unless I'm wrong, I believe that what Measure B, what that initiative says is up to 10%. Is that right?
No,
Usually.
Okay. So basically, we can spend whatever, but it's very clear that the voters voted in a training center. That was part of this initiative. So, I personally have struggled with spending money on a training center. But also, I would agree with Dr. Miller that when we go to get a room for a training, it's a struggle. And this room that we're in right now is a room that we consistently use for training and for meetings. When we want to use the conference center, we pay anywhere from $250 to $1,000. And even if the city waives that, which they have been gracious and have waived, we can't ask them to waive it twice a week or twice a month. So when you look at space within the county system, we don't have a lot of space. And so if we were going to actually set up a training plan, I'm not sure where we would do that, just because we don't have a lot of space. As far as my initial comment about the glacial speed that the county moves in or government moves in, the challenge here is that the sheriff found a piece of property that really looks ideal for this training center. And in my opinion, the price of this property is really good, and it would be advantageous for us to pick up a piece of property under $400,000 or approximately $400,000, and then even if we had to spend, twice that, which I can't imagine, to bring it up to where we wanted it to be, it's still a good price. I agree with the sheriff. If we were looking at going from the ground up, I don't know what it would cost us, but it would probably cost us more than $400,000. So I guess, in my opinion, the question is, do we want a training center? Do we want a separate building? Do we want to make this into a training center that could be utilized not only for Mendocino County, but regionally, and that would assist us in paying for speakers coming in? I think how often we use it is a question, but I can see, it's one of those things that if you build it and you have it, I think we would use it regularly. As far as the sheriff's statement about approximately 30% being county dollars, I agree with the sheriff that we need to be very fair and we need to obviously follow the law. What's going to be Measure B and what's going to be county money. And we have talked about this. I don't think there's any problem there. So, I guess my opinion is whether we like it or not, it is in the initiative that we have a training center. It doesn't say we go out and build $1 million training center, but really, what's the quality that we want for a training center? And as far as not having multiple meetings on the training center, we spent the last 16 months talking about a PUP, crisis residential, crisis stabilization, the Kemper report, and everything else. And those were the priorities, not the training center. But the fact is the training center might be the easiest part of Measure B to actually implement. And, you see a piece of property, this piece of property is going to go really quick. Based on what happens in this meeting today, I have no doubts this property is going to go into escrow with this week would be my guess. There are multiple offers. And I've talked with the realtor too. So, we make a decision or we don't. If we, if we decide that we want to talk about this next month, we can continue to talk about a training center, just like we've talked about the other programs that we want to implement. But we won't be talking about this property because this property will be gone. I don't even think Ross will be able to make an offer because I think there are 2 other offers. So you might as well forget it, buddy. But anyway, so I hope that we can make a decision on something today. Thank you.
So, in the zoning, from what I read, it says educational facilities. Is a training center considered an educational facility, or is it vocational training for police department? All right, so that's one question. Another question is the behavioral health director and the sheriff think this facility is needed. It's in the Measure B. If they think it's needed, I support them in moving forward with it. One thing that I don't want is to have this come at the expense of having the mental health facilities that the Kemper report and everything else has been pounded upon. So again, I ask this question, how much money is going to be required for ongoing training expenses out of Measure B? Because that's what's critical in the long run.
If I may, through the chair, the training center can also be a component of the police and fire protection services facility. So that is a permitted use in the RR5. Okay, so I said earlier it's a standalone, but just like the sheriff's department, you have training facilities within the sheriff's department. You have ancillary uses within the sheriff's department. So it could theoretically be possible that you can do this under the fire and police services. But again, we start looking at other uses that start coming into this. We have to look at it much more closely. So ideally, in order to really come up with a decision of what is it, we really have to divide up how much of it is going to be for what type of use. But police and fire is definitely, per the code, unallowed use in the RR5.
Thank you.
Ross?
So I have a couple of comments. So one of the comments would be relating to, we haven't really vetted this and everything. It's like, so if we decide to vet this, then we're really deciding not to buy that property. Just to make sure we're clear on that. This is like today or not. So you gotta ready, fire, aim sometimes. And this committee's not really great at that so far. I have a question. Could you give me a sense of how much that you've spent in renting space for training? So we're not talking the $45,000 to put on the training, but you guys rented space. And maybe you could also answer the same question, like, how much have we spent on space rent for training? Because you do have to do this cost-benefit rate analysis, right? You have to say, well, this is how much we spend currently, and if we rented at Full Hill, which Shannon would love this, if we rented the conference center at Full Hill, what would we spend if we just rented every place? And I get Tom's putting his thing up because he's saying we can't rent space because we need to have some permit, and I get that. So we have to. Do you know how much you spent?
I wouldn't be able to say how much off the top of my head, because I think there's two things I'd have to look at. How much we paid to rent the space. Sometimes we're able to get people to waive it, but not always. Our behavioral health advisory board meetings, sometimes we actually have to pay for them to have their meetings at different facilities also. But sometimes what happens is because we can't find a facility that has opening on that day that can take the capacity, then we have to pay the speaker twice or 3 times to come back to fill it. So it's a combo of not only just rental space, but did we have to have that training more than once to accommodate the number of people we needed to get trained. One thing that is required by the Department of Healthcare Services, which is who licenses us to bill Medi-Cal, is specific trainings for behavioral health staff. So we're required both for behavioral health and substance, so for mental health and substance use disorders training, we're required to produce so many trainings per year. And every staff and provider, so every contracted provider has to attend these trainings. So if we can't get them all into one, sometimes we're having to do multiple trainings, so that can extend our costs.
So then my other questions would be for Tom. So do you have a sense of what portion of the use would be for Mendocino County first responders and other professionals that deal with mental health? Like what percent would that be? And I'm just looking for a very broad brush. And then the other question is, what do you think is what will be all in, what is that project? Is that $1 million project? Is it a $500,000 project? We're talking a total of 260, right? Existing, or 360, count the whole thing, but a total of 360, some of which the sheriff's department will pay for. But what do you think all in that thing is gonna be?
Fair question. All in is under $500,000, including the shoot, don't shoot electronic portion of it. I want to talk a little bit about her answer regarding that, because I agree with everything she has said. But one point that has to be important is sometimes we don't have trainings because we don't have space. And the other thing is our training room for such things as perishable skills, law enforcement goes through perishable skills, whether it's mental health, one-on-one contact, or so forth. Our training happens in the same room as the county's Emergency Operations Center. And so if the EOC has been activated, all of our training is taken off the board. We don't have the training. So it's, obviously training takes second fiddle to an ongoing disaster. And the fires we've had have kept our EOC going for 2 months at a time. And so we either canceled training or split the training up, and as the doctor said, paying an instructor to come up twice because we have to have smaller rooms in training. So, but all in is certainly under $500,000 of getting the, basically they're.
I love your optimism, but I'm really challenging that.
No, we're on video, so I'm you know, one of the things about a mental health training facility, it's a cool phrase, mental health training facility. There is no such thing in California as a mental health training facility. I've looked. And so we don't have a model to look at and says, well, we want to build one just like yours. What this is going to be is a model where other counties are going to say, we want to build one just like Mendocino County has. So it's going to be a facility where I don't even think as a brain trust, we can come up with all the applications that it's going to be used for.
Ted?
Yeah, I want to just follow up on something Carmel said. I visited the facility. I think we have a unique opportunity to get something that will really benefit everything that we do here. And I agree that if we don't act right away, this particular opportunity will be gone. So my question is, we are a board that recommends to the Board of Supervisors. So if we decided today to recommend the purchase of this facility, how long then would it take to get an answer from the board? And we've got a board member here. And would it still be available? You know, what are the chances it can get bought in between when we might recommend and when it would actually have a chance to get purchased?
Okay, Carmel, would you like to answer?
So we scheduled today's meeting to get a recommendation or not get a recommendation for Measure B. This is scheduled on the board agenda tomorrow in closed session, as we would do with any real property issue. The goal was, if Measure B wanted to make a recommendation to purchase this property, we would go forward with closed session. If Measure B decides not to make a recommendation to purchase this property, this would be it. So, if Measure B makes a recommendation, we bring that recommendation to the board tomorrow. If the board gives us the approval to go ahead and move forward with the purchase, the realtor gets a letter on Wednesday, and we should be able to open escrow. So, that is the lightning speed that government can do.
That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Lloyd?
Yeah, still not sure if the question's been answered. I'm hearing that the use permit would allow for police and fire. I'm not hearing the word behavioral health training. Would that be a use that we could go with without having to go through the permit process? Seems like, you know, we need the answer to that question before, and I want to also add that I feel, I looked at the building, looked at the property, I feel it's a great value for the county of Mendocino, and I think it would be kind of foolish to let it slip, but I understand everybody's concern. But I'd just like to get, I think we need the answer to that behavioral health training. Can we do that at this facility without having to go through the use permit process? I don't know, Kit? Is that?
I would
Yeah,
flip
Nash
it to
is-
Nash.
Nash is here for this reason.
So if I may, through the chair, the police and fire facility is a permitted use, does not require a use permit. When we talk about major impact facilities and utilities, that's a catch-all that covers everything from hospitals to training facilities to schools and so on. That does require a use permit. So that's why we need to look at how this is going to be structured. Again, as I pointed out, a typical police and fire facility, whether it's a small community or a large community, will have training centers within the building itself to train police personnel and so on. And I think of these facilities as individual classrooms. It's no different than what you see here on this campus, where you have conference room A, B, and C, and so on, that can be used for training within the umbrella of the police and fire. But then when we start talking about other uses, that's when we spread out into the use permit. And again, without having more information about the property and the parking and so on, it's really hard to answer that question. But if this was a facility where, and again, I'm going to use the example of the existing sheriff's facility. You have classrooms or office space that you use for training. That in itself is an ancillary use of the primary use. But when you start going in outside of that umbrella, then we start moving into a different type of a facility. And again, it triggers change of occupancy use, again, where sprinklers may be required, certain upgrades need to be done, and so on. But that's just going to depend on the use.
Do you have any idea how long that process is?
If you're looking at a use permit process, you're probably looking at about 6 months, maybe 4 months. And again, it's all primarily due to preparing a CEQA document and then doing the public noticing process.
And how much cost does that have? I mean, is it
As far as time and so on, well, again, there's building permits and so on that may be, and I don't know what the cost of the actual work is going to be.
And when you say CEQA, the only time I've heard that before is having to consider an alternative site.
This is a type of site that you could likely do a negative declaration, and you basically have to address any negative impacts. And so you would not necessarily for this type of a facility, because you already have an existing building that you're just going to repurpose it. And it's such a small scale that typically when you're dealing with churches, they already have some sort of educational component built into it.
Yeah, and on that note, and I'm not a planner, but if we're talking about 70% of this facility being a training facility or educational facility, I think it would be hard to ignore that through the process. So if this committee decides to move forward with this purchase today, and I completely understand the desire to see some action here, but it should not be without it being contingent upon full entitlements of the use permit and clearing the CEQA, because otherwise we bought a lemon. And so I guess I've made my opinion clear on that one. I would like clarification on this don't shoot component of the facility. Is that an indoor shooting range? What is that? I'd like to know more about that.
Do you have some clarification?
I do, please. Within, again, the permitted uses within the rural residential 5-acre minimum zone, civic uses are permitted, and they refer to section 20.020.005 to clarify what are civic uses. And it says civic use types include the performance of utility, educational, recreational, cultural, medical, protective, governmental, and other uses which are strongly vested with public or social importance. They also include certain certain uses accessory to the above as specified in chapter 20.164, accessory use regulations. So that, I hope, provides further clarification.
Thank you. Mark?
What's the difference between a minor use permit and a major use permit? Because according to this, administrative services and government would be subject to a minor use permit. As well, it says a religious assembly, which that building is religious assembly now.
So if I may, through the chair, the difference between the two use permit types is one goes to the zoning administrator, that is the minor use permit, and the major use permit goes to the planning commission. So basically, it's there are two hearing bodies, except that the zoning administrator is one person, and that is typically the planning director who acts as the zoning administrator or his designee. And the major use permits have to go to the planning commission.
To continue with that, would the CEQA requirement be needed on a minor use permit?
Yes.
To answer your question regarding indoor shooting range, I think that's a far cry from what a shoot-don't-shoot is. It's an interactive digital component of training where a person talks to something that's on a screen, and the screen actually talks back. And like I said, it could be the exact same person with a gun, and 5 minutes later, the exact same person would have a spoon. So there's no noise involved. It's not going to be any kind of shooting range where projectiles are fired. It's laser, digital, quiet training.
What, oh, sorry.
Problem. Please?
I saw the property and I thought it was a great deal. It's really lovely.
Would you repeat your name?
Josephine Silva. And I'm really, really in favor of having a training center. And this obviously could work. But one thing I did notice, with all respect to you, Sheriff Allman, is that the small house, which is 2 bedrooms, I walked into and found that as you go in, there's like a living room, small, that's open to the kitchen. And the kitchen has washer and dryer cabinet. And then you walk to the bedrooms. There's a bathroom, large enough actually, it seemed, for even a wheelchair. And there's a larger bedroom, and then there's a smaller bedroom now used as an office. There's a patio in the back. Connected to it is a garage that could be used differently. What struck me about this property was that would be perfect for a CSU, and it would be available very quickly. And that the sheriff may want to modify the large 2,300-foot building so that with the movable walls, so that a whole section could be used for the deputies, and also the rest of it as a training center. I'm suggesting this because suddenly it just looked totally different. The other part of it is I think the best trainers would be those who have experienced the need for crisis response people. And I really feel that a training center should be near one of the mental health facilities. And so I suddenly looked at this property differently. The other aspect of it that, for me was kind of a negative is that I thought it should be near one of the colleges so that the training center could offer a whole month-long training for people who are interested in this kind of work. I hope that you really consider the small house as a CSU. I know that that's going to open up some other conversation here, but it's a great price.
Thank you. Jed, did you?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry, Kate.
So just a comment for the public. The only person that looked at that other building was the speaker, and that is because this Measure B commission was there to view the training facility. So none of this commission went into that other room. So just a note.
Thank you. Yes, please.
Good morning, Jill Schrader with Redwood Quality Management Company. I don't know anything about this property, nor do I have an opinion. I just wanted to remind us that when we put the initiative on the ballot and worked very closely with the sheriff, and Dr. Barish, you'll remember our conversations were that the training facility would be the place where law enforcement, fire, ambulance, those who work inside the CSU, CRT, hospitals, and the like mental health practitioners would actually gather and work together on behalf of changing the way in which we work with the mentally ill in our communities. So I think from a use perspective, it could be used every day. I mean, there's so many interagency kinds of issues that come up right now every single day around our mental health clients and their interaction with law enforcement, but also their interaction with the hospitals, with the clinics, with the jails, with those of us in the community. So in terms of the use, I would also say that again, you haven't seen the house at all, but I know that a CSU is a completely different animal. That would need to be built. A CRT is a house where you can take people and put them in what is, really a house with ADA. But a CSU has so many regulations that it would probably have to be built from the ground up. So that is it.
Thank you for your. Any other comments? Yes, Lou.
My question is about the substation. Do you see that as a long-term solution? And I understand you've been looking around for other locations. Is that something you may continue to do, or the substation going to be a permanent decision?
If everything can work out, with the community and with everything, it would be a permanent substation right without.
So you wouldn't be looking for
Right, correct.
Yes, sir.
If there's no other comments, I'd like to make a motion, but I'll clear out the comments.
I had one question, and that is for Lynn. I don't know how serious the remaining questions are as far as use permit, et cetera, to influence buying the property or not, but I guess one other possibility, and it sounds like this is more and more remote, as to whether we can have a contingency as to whether the contingent on the use would be covered.
Absolutely.
Yes. I'm sorry?
Oh, I'm sorry, we seem to have a screen.
A light show going on.
Light show reason.
It's 4th of July week, okay?
So that's, I guess that's just another option. Lynn suggested we could be contingent on whether or not this is actually zoned for what we want to use it for. Carmel, go ahead.
Well, the only thing thank you, Chair Brush. I wasn't certain what you were going to say, but this property is in the unincorporated area, so it is within the county jurisdiction. So as far as working with our planning department, I can assure the Measure B committee that the planning department will move this to the top of the list if there's any work that needs to be done, whether, for whatever reason it would be rezoning or continue CUP or whatever. I can assure this committee that this will be a #1 priority of the planning department.
Thank you. Sheriff Alden.
With no other comments, I'd like to make a motion. I just want to make sure there's no other comments.
Okay. Any other comments? All right.
I'd like to make the motion that we support this idea. We recommend to the Board of Supervisors, we send a recommendation.
Wait, you're gonna have to slow down, sorry.
So the last paragraph on the agenda summary is, it's recommended that the Measure B committee approve the recommendation to the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors for the purchase of this property to be used as a regional behavioral health training facility / sheriff's office substation at the next available Mendocino County Board meeting after today's meeting. And I encourage our committee to support this, which the voters have told us they support also. Thank you.
We have a motion, is there a second?
I second.
Motion and a second, discussion.
Yeah, I would again encourage the motion to include, I know the Realtor has said that this would be okay. I think it's important that it be part of the mission, that the recommendation to purchase is conditional upon the approval of entitlements and necessary CEQA.
Maker of the motion supports that. Thank
I'm
you.
sorry, can you repeat that then?
So the recommendation of purchase is conditional upon full entitlements and CEQA, I don't know, clearance, what's the appropriate term?
I think if you just say, subject to securing of all required entitlements and preparation of appropriate secret documents.
With that, thank you very much.
Chair, before we would accept that, before the maker of the motion would accept that revision into the motion, could we just ask the Realtor, who has 2 other offers pending on this property, if she sees if that would be a problem at all for the seller or not?
I already asked.
Okay, and she said okay?
Yes.
Well, rather
I missed
expanded, rather expanded, you asked whether or not, as to the zoning, whether or not, excuse me, as I understood it, whether or not the existing zoning would allow this as a permitted use, which I read the portion, and the planning department, of course, would have authority to review these things too, more so. And so there's permitted uses, and then there's the minor use permit or the major use permit, and that's one aspect of what we were discussing. As to CEQA, what would the timeline be in order to?
I don't know.
Yes.
I
What
don't
is
know.
involved, excuse me, now, just to CEQA?
It's a review of the project, and again, it could be 30 days or it could be 6 months. I don't know without any details. I can't give you a firm answer.
Are we talking about an environmental impact report?
Nope. You're
No.
talking about a negative declaration, but still you need to look at different aspects of it.
Right.
So one further question on this is, would this negate the use, the proposed use, depending on how this came out? Would it make a difference in terms of the purchase? Significant difference?
It's difficult to answer that because the project itself has to be defined and then looked at. And then be able to define what is the use. In other words, how much of it is going to be used for training, how much of it is going to be used for law enforcement, how much of it is going to be used for behavioral, and then that's going to define the scope of the project. Because you then have to look at, is there adequate parking for all of the uses? And then can some of these uses be shared? So an analysis has to be done first.
See who's next?
The only thing I would like to ask the maker of the motion is to put in that 70% is Measure B, 30% is.
My bad on that one, yes, and so clearly, what I would like to add to the motion, Chair, is funding would be 70%, which is $258,300 for Measure B funds, with 30%, $110,700 from the Sheriff's Office. Thank you.
Would the seconder approve?
And then Mark?
I'd like to ask of the sheriff making the motion, that this training center is for the uses allowed under the RR5, which is fire and police. If we do that, then we don't have any of this other stuff.
And the answer to that would be yes. I don't know if we need to put that in a motion.
I think it's critical.
Then what I would recommend is, what I'll add to the motion is, we've heard we've heard from Nash and we've heard from the Realtor regarding the definition of the R5 allowabilities. if that's a word. And certainly nothing would happen at that building which would be outside the boundaries that the law allows. Does that answer your question? We've heard two different definitions. More, and actually from the realtor, from Lynn, we heard regarding a little bit more of a concise part of it. So maybe she could read that again.
Yeah, and the other, as to the use now, it is an educational facility. It's got adequate parking for that containment of 120 or more in occupancy that you commented regarding. In fact, it's been known that it was commonly used that way as to the numbers of people. But back to the civic use that you asked regarding, the permitted uses within the R5 zone include civic use types, which was referred to in a separate category of the ordinance code.
And should this be in the motion, or is this just, I'm asking Kit here.
So one of the things that I would like to comment on is, again, reminding this committee that what they are is they recommend something to the board. To dial down so specifically on what you recommend to the board, I think is inappropriate, and the board can do, sort of take it from there anyway. I think if you give them the general intent, which is the motion that Sheriff Allman has made, and they, of course, can hear your comments. It will be presented to the board. But then let them look at all of those issues. They're going to make sure in terms of the economics, they're going to make sure in terms of the use. Those are all questions they're going to be asking and following up, and they will be wanting to follow the intent of the Measure B Commission. And again, you're an oversight committee, so it is your job, if you feel that they are not following the intent of this committee, to, you know, voice your concerns, your complaints to them, so that they do follow your recommendation. But that's all, you know, again, to narrow it so specifically, I think is problematic, just because this is an advisory board.
Right, and indeed, when you asked would there be contingencies, we would grant a contingency for you to take the time as a board, when it gets to the board, to review some things, you know, whether it's the roof or any number of things, including zoning and use. And so we'll have additional time in order to isolate that. It wouldn't be a long term, but again, those details would be followed up with through the next part of this, which would be the actual negotiation.
And given the building, we could probably buy and sell it.
Exactly. I had actually recommended a much higher value, and the owner was looking for a quick sale because they have needs outside of this country. They are building additional facilities, so their goal was to move quicker than what I even recommended. Excuse me.
Chair Grush, I would like the maker of the motion to consider what our chief counsel said. I think that we could make this motion so detailed that the recommendation to the board helps to kill the deal, rather than actually get this forward.
Let's have the motion read, if that's okay.
I would love to read the motion. I have a motion by Sheriff Allman, seconded by Member Diamond, to approve a recommendation to the Mendocino County Board of Supervisors for the purchase of this property to be used as a regional behavioral health training facility / sheriff's office substation at the next available Mendocino County Board meeting after the July 8th, 2019 Mental Health Citizens Oversight Committee Measure B meeting. The recommendation of purchase is subject to securing all required entitlements and preparation of CEQA documents. Funding would be 70%, $258,300 from Measure B funds, with 30%, $110,700 from Sheriff's Office budget.
I think that answers your questions.
I guess, given that this property is desirable and has a couple other offers pending, I am concerned that we could scare the seller, and I understand what Lynn is saying. I am concerned that we could scare the seller, just based on the language that we have. I think when you know, we know that as a government entity, there are regulations, rules we need to follow. There's no doubt. We never purchase anything without doing a full-on inspection. That's not a problem. If I was selling this property and somebody talked about we can't do anything until we have everything cleared with CEQA, whether that's accurate or not, I don't know, I might go to the next seller. So if this committee really doesn't want to purchase the property, then let's just say it. So I am really concerned about that. I am the purchasing agent for the county. I am the one dealing with Lynn, also bringing this to the board. Is there any way that we could change that motion where it isn't so daunting?
So the part of the motion you'd like to change is the added on that it meets all, read the last part that you added.
I think the part you're referring to is the recommendation of purchase is subject to securing all required entitlements and preparation of CEQA documents.
Can I put all reasonable required documents and so forth? And listen, even if it's a minor use change, I don't see this taking an exorbitant amount of time. And if the realtors heard the motion, are you satisfied with the motion?
No, I would prefer, again, you have competition, and I'm not, and of course we have to do the right thing here too,
I understand,
of course.
I understand.
But as to CEQA can take time if an environmental impact report was required. That's traffic studies and.
Can she step up so we can get a
Oh, excuse me. I'm alert. CEQA, if it was required, could require such things as environmental impact reports, and just engineers to get that done, might take 60 to 90 days. So we would be offering them to the seller that we may need as much as 90 days or 180 days, or whatever it might take to get that all finished. But what instead would be preferred is if we had a contingency of, say, in this negotiation, as we would be talking later, if hopefully in 17 days we can learn that we need one or not, then if we were required that, if the planning department decided that was necessary, then in that 17 days we would learn that and then need to go back to the owner and say, could we have that additional time? I would prefer going that direction than walking in. I'd like to get you in contract, and then once there, if that were required, we either ask for additional time and get it, or we again might not be able to pursue this property, because that's a lot of time and that's a lot of requirement and additional cost.
And I understand that. So to our council, you've heard the seller's point of view. What wording would be appropriate for the motion to accept this?
So I would suggest that we go back to the original motion that is here with the addition that was requested of the 70-30 piece and remove all else, and understand, again, this committee should understand these are all of the things that the county has responsibilities for, will follow through on, I believe will take care of. But I think that gives enough flexibility for the board to consider this action.
Okay, so as a maker of the motion, I'm going to ask that Donna Muschetti's addition regarding the financial split, although the other addition be removed from my original motion.
So what we'll be removing is then the recommendation of purchase is subject to securing required entitlements and preparation of CEQA, is that correct?
That can be removed.
Correct, okay.
Chair Barry, I'd like to make one more comment. We were in escrow for at least a year.
2 years.
2 years on a piece of property. And we canceled the escrow a week before we were going to actually take ownership of the property. And that happened because the county was not satisfied with the environmental studies on that property, even though everybody else was. So I assure this committee, as the purchasing agent for the county and the person who will take the direction from the Board of Supervisors as to what to do with this property, that nothing will be done that will not be a conservative approach to purchasing this property and spending measured money. And I thank Lynn McNamara for being here today.
Jen? Yeah, I just had a couple questions. One was, is it necessary to to go through the secret requirements prior to purchase? I mean, can't that be done after it's?
No.
Yeah. And the other one is, how big is the property? I see the square footage of the buildings, but not how big the actual.
Approximately 1 acre?
Correct.
Okay.
It's 1 acre, thank you.
Approximately.
Almost.
So there would be room for expanding the parking lot if needed.
Any other comments? Yes, sir. Mr. Ripper.
My last one, I promise. So I still am hopeful I can get in my asterisks about, an estimated price.
I have down here, yes.
And then estimated price, and then also beneficial use, future costs to be, because, whatever we were going to do to expand it, reflective of beneficial use. For the purchase, but then future costs.
So, to the clerk, can I ask that this item be on the agenda of the meeting that we're meeting in 2.5 weeks on?
The purchase of this property?
Just this property in general, the discussion, not the
Discussion, correct, yes,
discussion,
absolutely.
yeah.
Do you have something else, Jim?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I have one more.
Yes, sir.
Just clarification, I'm eyeballing it here, but it looks like the 70-30 split is based on square footage. Is that how you came up with that?
Square footage, yes.
Okay, just wanted to clarify.
Any other comments?
Did we have the second agreed amendment?
Second
Yes,
grade.
yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Happy.
So we have a motion, motion and a second.
We should do a roll call vote.
I'm sorry,
We should do a roll call vote, I would recommend.
roll call.
Yes.
Sorry, what that is.
That we would hold
Yeah,
it.
instead of
You
raising
don't-
our hand.
Go right around the room.
Then we commit to a yes or no.
All right.
All right, so when I call your name, just please, yes or no. Member Diamond?
Yes.
Sheriff Ballman?
Yes?
Member Riley?
No.
Member Myrtle?
Yes.
Member Muschetti?
Yes.
Chair Brash?
Yes.
Member Weir?
Yes.
Member Liberty?
Yes.
Member Angela?
Yes.
Member McGordy?
I'd like to abstain.
And Member Miller?
Yes.
All right, motion carries with Member McGordy abstaining and Member Riley voting no. Dissenting.
Thank you.
Chair Barish, and as a follow-up, this will be going to the Board of Supervisors meeting tomorrow. The sheriff will be there in closed session on the 7th.
Thank you very much.
And then I would just like to say, if you have other items for the agenda for our regular meeting this month, please send them to me. This will be obviously one item on the agenda. If there's any others, please send them to me as soon as possible.
So I wanted to make sure that you guys got them. I sent them to both of you.
I have one, yes.
Okay.
Meeting adjourned.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you very much.